Hi everyone, and welcome to today's live IELTS class. My name is Adrian, and I'm broadcasting this IELTS session to you from Budapest, the location of the second and only basilica in the world, St. Stephen's Basilica. Just a little fun fact to start today's reading and vocabulary. IELTS reading and vocabulary today. Of course, we're not living in the past, we're living in the present, and it is the 11th of January. Hello, students joining in. Hi, Pachu. Hi, Kisi. Hi, Jason G. Hi, Afsana. Sarah, good to see so many students in. All right, as usual, the materials, this reading passage, the audio, the tips, strategies, they come from our websites, aehelp.com for academic IELTS and gieltshelp.com for general IELTS. All right. We just finished doing our live stream on our General IELTS Help channel. That's always before this one from 13:30 to 14:30 CET. And our academic IELTS is Central European time from 15 to 16 o'clock. So if you have questions, just email me, Adrian, A-D-R-I-A-N, at aehelp.com. Hi, Rekha. Good to see you in class. All right. Lots of members in class right off the hop, which is great. Members, don't forget to send me your recommendations for these members chat classes. I'm still waiting on those. So if you're curious about a topic, task 1 question, task 2 speaking, just send me an email so I can set up those classes. It's one of the perks for being a member. All right, let's start off with a little bit of reading, visualization, fluency, comprehension. I'm going to show you our passage here today, which looks like that. Mountains of ice. All right, you have a nice picture here of this mountain of ice floating in the ocean, also known as an iceberg. Students, when you have a picture with your IELTS passage, please pay attention to that. It is very valuable. There's a saying in English, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Naveen, iceberg, right? But it's one word, okay? And when you see that picture, you need to visualize, okay? So it's very important to visualize what you read. Okay, visualizing reading. Now, when you're visualizing, there are a lot of steps to effective visualization. So don't be too quick. Don't dismiss this as something too simple. People who are very successful in the world, in business, in life, are often very good at visualizing. It's a skill we are all born with, just like walking and running. And it's also a skill that we can all make a lot better. Hi, Sahil. Welcome aboard as a new member. Great. Sahil, send me an email after this class so I can hook you up with the practice exam and some other goodies. Thanks for coming on board as a channel member. So again, visualization, we can improve it just like running and walking, right? If you walk a lot, run a lot, train, you can run faster, run longer. If you train your visualization, you can see more clearly, you can see more detail, you can be a more active participant. So when you're visualizing, see the image clearly. Make it interesting. And include yourself. Be active in the pictures or in the video or in the film, let's say. Not like watching TV from far. Okay, what do I mean by that? So here, today's passage is mountains of ice. When you are reading this text, of course, we have the text here after. When you're visualizing, maybe what you want to see is, hey, let's start off by imagining that here you are. Okay. There, you're an adventurer. You have your adventurer's hat on. Maybe it's got a propeller. Okay, it's exciting times. You're climbing this iceberg. And hey, just for fun, you want to check out if that water is as cold as you think it is. And you jump in head first, take a nosedive, and splash. Hey, yay, you're in the water. Okay, so all jokes aside, that is what you do to visualize, okay? When you visualize, see images clearly, include yourself, make it interesting. Not by accident that I'm saying this, and I'm not inventing the wheel here, okay? This is agreed upon by professionals, by psychologists. When you do these steps, you can understand information clearer, you can hold information longer, and you can use and recall the information faster and more accurately, okay? So that's why you need to take these steps, okay? That's the idea here. That's why you're watching the film that you're a part of clearly. Okay, here we go. So what I would like you to focus on right now is read and visualize as you hear the audio. Okay, read and visualize. Prajim, I'm not sure what you mean by it's thundering, but I'm guessing maybe you're having a good time, you're laughing, something like that. All right, here we go. So one nice feature on our websites, and I know many of you students have our full course, we are one of the only IELTS companies in the world that actually has British audio for our reading sections. We know you don't have that in the real exam, but when you're preparing for IELTS, audio reading is really useful, okay? So here we go. I'm going to play the audio. I'm using my microphone and a Bose speaker. They're both good quality, but it's not the same as directly listening to the MP3. So if it's quiet for you, please just turn up the audio on your end and try to use a headset. Okay, if you have a headset, that's a good way to do it. All right, this is our academic IELTS website. I'm logged in, of course, as a premium user. And this is test 1, reading passage 1. So I am going for CD 1, reading 1. So everybody get ready. Don't worry about questions and answers just yet. Right now you're focusing on listening, reading, visualizing. Okay, that's your goal here. Read, picture, and understand. Here we go.
Icebergs. The word iceberg derives from the Dutch word ijsberg, meaning ice mountain. Icebergs are sections of glaciers that are broken off during the warm summer months and float freely in open water. Icebergs are typically found in open water, predominantly around Greenland and Antarctica. The characteristics of icebergs, their historical impact, and the methods we employ today to monitor them are important topics. The reason icebergs exist is because of the difference between the density of ice and the density of salt water. The density of ice is approximately 920 kilograms per cubic meter, while the density of salt water is approximately 1025 kilograms per cubic meter. Because ice is less dense than water, it floats. However, because the difference in densities is so small, only about 10% of the iceberg is visible above the ocean's surface. The rest of the iceberg hides below the water. This is the origin of the familiar expression, tip of the iceberg, used to describe a situation where only part of the problem is noticeable. Icebergs range in height from 1 meter all the way up to over 75 meters above sea level. The height measures the visible portion of the iceberg. The tallest icebergs may have a total height of over 650 meters, including their underwater portion. The largest ever recorded was 168 meters above the water, meaning the entire height of this floater was likely greater than 1,500 meters. For reference, that is twice the height of most skyscrapers. Different sized icebergs have different name classifications. The smallest icebergs are called brash ice. The next category up in size is called growlers, and the ones after that are called bergy bits. For whatever reason, after those three classes, the people in charge of naming the icebergs got a little less creative. The next classes simply ranged from small to very large. Icebergs can be massive objects. Very large icebergs can weigh more than 200,000 tons. The largest iceberg ever recorded was over 30,000 square kilometers in area. Again, for reference, that is the approximate size of the country of Belgium. The most famous iceberg in history is undoubtedly the one which eventually sunk the English ship Titanic off the coast of Newfoundland in 1912. At that point in time, there was no central group which monitored iceberg activity. Ships relied on lookouts to spot the icebergs. For the Titanic, the unfortunate attitude was that any iceberg big enough to do damage to the ship would be seen in time. This attitude was, of course, catastrophically wrong. The main reason it failed was the remarkable calmness of the water that ill-fated night. The easiest way to spot an iceberg from afar is to see waves crashing up against it. But on the night the Titanic sank, there were no such helpful waves. For all intents and purposes, the iceberg was invisible until it was too late. The captain swerved at the last minute, but as the side of the ship scraped across the iceberg, the hull of the ocean liner tore open. Things still may have been fine had it not been for the poorly designed watertight compartments. It turns out that when too many compartments were affected, the water was simply able to spill over to all the other compartments. This was an engineering defect that contributed to the Titanic's sinking. After the disaster of the Titanic, maritime authorities realized that a system needed to be put into place to monitor icebergs so that such a catastrophe would not be repeated. By 1914, the International Ice Patrol, IIP, was formed. Their purpose was to track all of the relevant meteorological and oceanographical data and to chart the movement of all major icebergs. Today, technology is used to track iceberg data. The Canadian Space Agency has multiple radar satellites which send microwaves off the ocean surface and record the reflection to track the movement of the icebergs. Maritime vessels have access to this information in real time, which allows them to know exactly where any local icebergs are at any moment, meaning that a repeat of the Titanic disaster is virtually impossible.
All right, students, for those students that have joined our premium course and have the audio for the reading, make sure to use it, okay? It's very, very useful. It's a good tool to help you improve your listening and reading skills. Geek, this is a British Englishman that is reading this particular passage, okay? All right, so I hope some of you were able to visualize clearly what's going on. Maybe in paragraph 1, you visualize that you're a Dutchman traveling around the world, especially Greenland, and Antarctica, so the north and the south, and you are studying icebergs. You're climbing on them, as I showed you in the picture in the beginning, because we need to monitor them, so keep an eye on them and understand their historical impacts. In paragraph 2, maybe you were a scientist in a laboratory experimenting with water and ice and noticing the differences between those two states of water. So that could have been. In paragraph 3, maybe you were a giant standing on these massive chunks of ice and picturing that. Okay, so in either case, whatever your visualization may be, a good exercise is write it down. Okay, as you read a paragraph and you picture what's happening, what you're doing in that paragraph, write down your imagination. Okay. Okay, we'll look at the questions here in a minute. I'm just teaching you some strategies to improve your comprehension. Too many students are thinking of the questions before they think of how can I improve my reading fluency and my reading comprehension. That is very, very important. Now, the same idea as with visualization, when you see a new word in your reading, because today's lesson is about reading and vocabulary, you should learn new vocabulary that you see in your reading. So let's read paragraph 1 together and let's pick a word that's new for you today. Okay, let's do that together. So here we go. Read with me. The word iceberg derives from the Dutch word ijsberg, meaning ice mountain. Icebergs are sections of glaciers that have broken off during the warmer summer months and float freely in open water. Icebergs are typically found in open water, predominantly around Greenland and Antarctica. The characteristics of icebergs, their historical impact, and the methods we employ today to monitor them are important topics. All right, students, what is an unfamiliar word or vocabulary from this first paragraph? So what is a word that's new for you? Okay, Afsana says the word glacier is new for me. Asil agrees. Glaciers, sure. Preeti says predominantly. Raman says the verb employ for me is kind of new. Juan Esteban Petanchur Hurtado says break off is new as a phrasal verb. Okay, sure. I'll take some of those. So in your reading passage, underline new words. This is when you're practicing at home, getting ready for IELTS. So you underline the word glaciers. If it's a new phrasal verb, sure, it's great to underline, broken off. Predominantly as well. Okay, sure, we'll take that one. And then somebody says the word employ. Okay, like in work, employ. Why not? Okay. All right, so what you should do is you should write that out in your vocabulary book. Okay. So this is a strategy to learn vocabulary from your reading, and it's very good to combine your reading practice with vocabulary practice, okay? So what did I do first here? Pick some new words from the paragraph. Okay, 2, write them down, right? So here our examples are glacier, employ, predominantly, and break off. Okay, now, of course, what you want to do is you want to figure out what these words mean. You want to figure out their word forms, okay? So, step number 2 is find the meaning and word form. Stay with me here, students. I know this isn't the most exciting, but it's very, very useful. Okay, so glacier. Anybody know what a glacier is? Don't want to just give you answers. Let's see. Anybody know what a glacier is? It's a good word to know, especially in today's world. Niraj says it's a river of snow. Yes, sure. Sunil says it's a mountain of ice. That's more of an iceberg. River of ice, Niraj. It is a noun, of course, and it is a massive, slow-moving, prehistoric chunk or piece of ice from the Ice Age. If many of you have seen the movie Ice Age, it's a famous kind of animation. There's Ice Age 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then that happened about 10,000 years ago, where a lot of the water, mostly ocean water, of course, in the world froze, and that created glaciers, these massive pieces or shields of ice that are mostly found around the north and south poles of our planet, and that's why they're prehistoric. So they're tens of thousands of years old pieces of ice, and they indeed move and melt slowly. We are still coming out of that ice age. Okay, good. So Ice Age. These are found, you can give more details. These are found mostly in the far north and south hemispheres. Okay? Hemisphere, maybe a new word for you as well, meaning the north and south side of the planet. Employ is a verb in this context, and it simply means to use. Okay? We'll go back there in a second. All right, predominantly. Anybody know the meaning of predominant? Geek says best way to describe the word is to give a synonym. Absolutely. Use your thesaurus for that, Geek. Use a thesaurus. Okay? Jubilant says use, to make use of. Predominantly means mostly or mainly. Yes, very good. Okay? It is a adverb or an adjective as well, I believe. It's an adjective. We'll check that in context in a second. It means mostly and mainly. Now, students, watch this too. When you have a word like predominantly, it's a nice long word made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 letters. You have a prefix, pre. Okay? Pre is called a prefix. It's the first part of the word. You have the root, dominant. Okay? And then you have the suffix. Okay? Dominant is the root. So when you're learning words, it's important to pay attention to prefix, root, suffix, the three parts of a word when you have it. You don't always have that, like with employ. That's just the root. But here you have prefix, root, suffix. That can help you figure out the meaning of the word. Prefix is usually a preposition like on, above, under, before, after. Okay? Here, the prefix pre, that's why prefix starts with pre as well, equals before. Okay? Dominant means the top. Means the alpha or the top. Okay? So the alpha wolf, the top wolf, is the leader of the wolf pack. It is the dominant wolf. All right? Stay with me. Don't lose yourself. ly, the suffix, will give you the grammar. Okay? When you see ly, it will usually be an adjective. Okay? Or an adverb. All right? So ly is the suffix. It gives you the grammar form of the word. The prefix gives you a preposition, and the root will give you an idea. So before the top as an adjective, meaning mostly or mainly. Okay? Pachu says ly has got to be an adverb. I believe you, Pachu. Let's check that out. Okay? All right. So again, predominantly. Okay? Before the number one, the top, the leader. So mostly. Okay? All right. Now, break off. Anybody know what that means? Break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar, as they say in the English version of that chocolate commercial. Kit Kat, I think it's a famous chocolate around the world. And detach. Aash sagu, you have a good idea. It's not de-attach, it's just detach. Okay? So you're right. Or another easy way to say it is separate. Okay? So detach or separate. All right? Snap off is another phrasal verb, Jason Lee, for break off. Okay, so separate. All right, so your first step is find the word form and find the meaning. Okay, and synonyms. Yes, use your thesaurus for this. All right. So employ, to use. Predominantly, yes, it's probably an adverb. I think you're right, Pachu. I'll have to see it in context. Mostly and mainly. Predominantly moving towards an idea. Yeah, sure. Break off, verb, detach or separate. Now, number 3, write an example sentence. Okay. And it's not that simple. When you're learning vocabulary, you need to do 3 important steps when you're writing the sentence. Make it unique or interesting. Include yourself and make it complex. Okay? Anybody notice something interesting that just happened here? You might think, whoa, Adrian, really interesting? With this topic? How? But there is, okay? So for students that are watching this class from the beginning, hint, hint. When you write an example sentence, you want to make it unique, interesting, you want to include yourself, and you want to make it complex, okay? I'll give you an example with the first word that we picked from paragraph 1. So here is employ, okay, means to use. Because I'm doing this reading about icebergs, I'm going to try to make my example as such. So I employed a spoon to dig myself out of the center of an iceberg because I had been frozen in its middle since the Ice Age. Okay? So notice what I'm doing. I employed a spoon to dig myself out of the center of an iceberg because I had been frozen in its middle since the Ice Age. So there I am, stuck, maybe in the position that I've been at. I have a little spoon in my hand, and I started finally digging my way out of the center of this massive iceberg because I'd been stuck there for 10,000 years. Interesting? Yes. Kind of funny. It's kind of weird. Just the time span, 10,000 years. It's weird that I'm using a spoon. Digging myself out of an iceberg with a spoon would be quite the job. And it's complex. I'm using cause and effect, the word because. Okay? Now, why did I say to do this? So I said when you write an example with new vocabulary, make it unique, make it interesting, include yourself, and make it complex. What is interesting about this? What do you notice? Hint, hint. It's not the first time I'm mentioning these ideas this lesson. It's not the first time. Okay, Haifa says, well, it's probably going to help you to memorize the words. And Asil says, you're going to memorize them faster. Aash, you're giving the reason of why, because we're paying more attention when an idea is weird or strange. Absolutely. Rashni Kunte says, well, you'll remember it longer because the brain fixes ideas and holds them that it finds interesting and that it feels it's a part of, that it belongs to. Okay? So, if I wanted to combine another word in here, I could say in the middle of a glacier. And that's a cool technique to combine words. What I'm hoping some of you will realize is that when you're learning vocabulary and when you're remembering from visualization, it's very, very similar. Sahil's saying the cerebellum is a part of the brain, if you think of the central nervous system as the brain. Strategy in visualizing that I said at the beginning is see the image clearly, make it interesting, include yourself. Notice that when you're visualizing, so when you're picturing information that you read to improve your comprehension, thereby your IELTS band score, you're including yourself and you're making it interesting. Okay? When you're learning vocabulary, it's the same idea. You include yourself in the vocabulary, in the example sentence, and you make it interesting. Okay? When you include yourself, and this is the reason, okay? So in both visualization and vocab learning, when you include yourself and make it interesting, your brain will hold the information longer, which means remember better, and it will recall the information faster, use information better. Okay, that's just fact. That's a proven fact in educational psychology. You'll find these strategies on our website, and you'll find it in high-level educational psychology methods, strategies, and text. Okay? And Hassan, absolutely it helps. By making your sentence complex, so including because or a condition, if I were stuck in an iceberg, I would use a spoon to dig my way out. So that's a conditional sentence. By making it complex, it's also helping me to learn and improve my grammar, okay? So keep this in mind. All right. Students, before we go on to the next one here, try to do an example sentence with predominantly. Okay? So I showed you the sentence with employ and glacier. Try to write an example sentence with predominantly where you include yourself, you make it interesting, and you make it a complex or compound sentence. Okay, so use the word predominantly for making it a good example. All right, go ahead. Alpha, I see that you tried with the previous. That's great. Or you did with the previous. That's great. I witnessed how the government employed a huge machine to break off a piece of ice from a predominantly larger glacier in New Zealand. Alpha Omega, a fantastic example. I applaud you, okay? That's great. Very good, Alpha. Good grammar, good complex sentence, good use of vocabulary from the reading. Fantastic, okay? Very good. Pooja says, I predominantly do exercise in the morning. Yeah, it's an adverb. You're right. Again, Pachu. So I predominantly do exercise in the morning because in the evenings, I usually go skydiving. Okay? So Pooja, make it a complex sentence. Make it interesting. Okay? Sahil, just get off the brain train. There are a lot of different definitions for what the brain is. Okay, some people say it's just the cerebrum. Some people say it's the entire central nervous system, including the cerebellum and the spine. I studied master's level biopsychology, so we could argue about it all day and all night. Don't worry about it. Focus on the lesson, okay? All right, Asil says, I predominantly wear... watch the spelling, Asil, on wear. I predominantly wear white clothes because they make me feel better. Sure, it's kind of interesting. Why would be my next question, but that's good. Hassan says, the market in the city center is predominantly utilized by midday workers. Okay, that's kind of weird, but Hassan, your example does not include you. Okay, again, be active, so be a participant in your example sentence. All right. Sahil says, I predominantly focus on the subject. Oh, and we have a lot of... Okay. I predominantly focus on that subject, which is really tough. Is okay, Sahil. I predominantly focus on the subject, which is really tough because I need to make a ton of money. Sahil, make it complex or compound, okay? It's important. Haifa says, while I was swimming in the sea, a shark tried to eat me, and I broke off the shark's nose with a knife. You can't just break off the shark because break off means to separate. So it's separate from another piece or from its other half. Okay, so you can break off the shark's head or fin, Haifa, but you can't just break off the shark. Okay, doesn't make sense that way. But a good try, Haifa, good try. Okay, Juan Pablo says, when I visited Africa, I looked in the jungle and the lions predominantly ate the weaker animals. Juan Pablo, good. Just remember to keep your tense paralleled. When you start with I visited Africa or when I visited Africa, it means the past. So make sure your other verbs are in the past also. All right, so great work there, ladies and gents. Marwa says, I predominantly depend on aehelp.com for my IELTS study because it is the world's greatest resource for getting a band 9. Make it complex, Marwa, and thank you for letting me get that fantastic pitch in there. Awesome. Okay, ladies and gents, you're doing a fantastic job. Just remember, include yourself, make it interesting, make it complex. It's the most effective way to learn new vocabulary, okay? Combine it with your reading text. Here we go. Let's read the next paragraph from the reading together, okay? You're all doing a great job so far. Let's keep rolling. Read with me, nice and loud, okay? Loud reading is important, okay? Read with me, nice and loud. The reason icebergs exist is because of the difference between the density of ice and the density of salt water. The density of ice is approximately 920 kilograms per cubic meter, while the density of salt water is approximately 1,025 kilograms per cubic meter. Because ice is less dense than water, it floats. However, because the difference in densities is so small, only about 10% of the iceberg is visible above the ocean's surface. The rest of the iceberg hides below the water. This is the origin of the familiar expression tip of the iceberg, used to describe a situation where only part of the problem is noticeable. Great, so maybe some of you are thinking density is a new word. Obviously, it's a noun. Meaning the thickness or closeness of molecules in a given area. Okay, so gas is not very dense. Solid rock is very dense. All right. Now, give me an example sentence with this one. Okay, so let's do one more of this, and then we'll read the rest of the passage and answer questions, I promise you. Okay? So, give me an example sentence with density. Density. So density means how thick or how tight the parts are together, the molecules, okay? One of the most dense objects known to man is a diamond. Gold, platinum are very dense, okay? Gases are not dense, all right? In given volume, Pachu says, hey, I think, yeah, you're right, Pachu. I think volume is a better word there. I just didn't want to get too scientific. Okay. But thank you for that technical correction. You're absolutely right. You're on top of it today, Pachu. Good for you. Mario Espitia is a gold expert. Mario, you're after my own heart. I love gold. And says gold has a density of 3 grams per cubic centimeter. I think it's per cubic millimeter, isn't it, Mario? Anyway. All right, let's see what you have for your example sentences. Hassan says the density of the population in China is more significant than the one in America. Hassan, you gotta make it interesting and you gotta include yourself in the example. Hassan, please include yourself and make it interesting, okay? Sunil Forex says the density of my hair is not as good as it was in my childhood because of stress. Sunil, very good, funny, interesting. You included yourself. Just remember, Sunil, to make it complex, okay? So the density of my hair is not as good as it was during my childhood because of stress. Sure, I'll even take that one as the example I'll put up here. So the density, it's true for me as well, Sunil. You're not alone. I think a lot of men will agree here. The density of my hair is not as good as it used to be when I was a child because of the stresses I underwent growing up. Okay, I like it. That was funny. All right, some more examples coming up now. Let me take a good look. Jason G, the commissioner noted that the population density of certain city blocks had fallen dramatically. Jason, where are you in that sentence, and why is that interesting? The brain will not hold information where it doesn't find itself to be a participant and that it doesn't find interesting, especially in today's world, students. We have information overload with our cell phones and TVs and computers. So our brain is just throwing out information every day, all day. That's the biggest job our brains do these days, is just throw out information. 300 years ago, we lived on a farm. Everything was quiet, and we looked after our animals, and the walls were made of stone, and we probably had one picture in the entire house that our great-grandfather painted. Life wasn't so exciting in some sense, so we remembered everything. We know where every stone and rock and grass and tree is on the farm. These days, colors, pictures, they're everywhere. They're hitting us from all directions every day when we're awake. So our brain is just going, neat, 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 neat. Stop, 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 block, 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 throw out, throw out, throw out. You have to trick your brain into remembering and holding information. Include yourself. Include yourself. Make it interesting. Okay, I see too many examples where I do not see you participating. All right. Prajim Lama says, when I did a science project, I saw the density of salt water is more than pure water because the egg floated in salt water but sank in pure water. Prajim, very good. I like it. You're in there, okay? You're definitely in that information, and it's funky. It's interesting. I can visualize you in that science class with your little eggs going, oh, look at that. That egg was sinking. That egg's not. And it got salt in that water. All right. Farhad says, the gemstone I have in my ring is very high density, so I can punch through walls. That's great, Farhad. I like it. Just make it complex, okay? You're included in there. All right, ladies and gents, let's get back to our reading now. So you have the idea. That's how you practice your vocabulary and your reading. Read a paragraph, highlight a new word, write it into your vocabulary book, write down the definition, the word form, make an interesting, complex sentence that includes you. Very effective way of learning vocabulary. Much more effective than repetition or rote memory, where you're just repeating, hoping to hammer it into your mind, okay? All right, students, let's read the rest of the passage. We'll answer the questions. Here we go. Icebergs range in height from 1 meter all the way up to 75 meters above sea level. The height measures the visible portion of the iceberg. The tallest iceberg may have a total height of over 650 meters, including their underwater portion. The largest ever recorded was 168 meters above the water, meaning the entire height of this floater was likely greater than 1,500 meters. For reference, that is twice the height of most skyscrapers. Let's keep going. Different sized icebergs have different name classifications. The smallest icebergs are called brash ice. The next category up in size is called growlers, and the ones after that are called bergy bits. For whatever reason, after those three classes, the people in charge of naming the icebergs got a little less creative. The next classes simply range from small to very large. Icebergs can be massive objects. Very large icebergs can weigh more than 200,000 tons. The largest iceberg ever recorded was over 30,000 square kilometers in area. Again, for reference, that is the approximate size of the country of Belgium. The most famous iceberg in history is undoubtedly the one which eventually sunk the English ship Titanic off the coast of Newfoundland in 1912. At that point in time, there was no central group which monitored iceberg activity. Ships relied on lookouts to spot the icebergs. For the Titanic, the unfortunate attitude was that any iceberg big enough to do damage to the ship would be seen in time. This attitude was, of course, catastrophically wrong. The main reason it failed was the remarkable calmness of the water that ill-fated night. The easiest way to spot an iceberg from afar is to see waves crashing up against it. But on the night the Titanic sank, there were no such helpful waves. For all intents and purposes, the iceberg was invisible until it was too late. The captain swerved at the last minute, but as the side of the ship scraped across the iceberg, the hull of the ocean liner tore open. Things may have been fine had it not been for the poorly designed watertight compartments. It turns out that when too many compartments were affected, the water was simply able to spill over to all other compartments. This was an engineering defect that contributed to the Titanic's sinking. After the disaster of the Titanic, maritime authorities realized that a system needed to be put into place to monitor icebergs so that such a catastrophe would not be repeated. In 1914, the International Ice Patrol, IIP, was formed. Their purpose was to track all of the relevant meteorological and oceanographical data and to chart the movement of all major icebergs. Today, technology is used to track iceberg data. The Canadian Space Agency has multiple radar satellites which send microwaves off the ocean surface and record the reflection to track the movement of icebergs. Maritime vessels have access to this information in real time, which allows them to know exactly where any local icebergs are at any moment, meaning that a repeat of the Titanic disaster is virtually impossible. All right, first set of questions. Yes, no, not given. Let's do this. Here we go. Yes, no, not given questions. I'm not teaching the strategy today. I'm just doing it. Okay? Here we go. Yes, if the statement agrees with the writer. No, if the statement contradicts the claims of the writer. Not given. It's if it's impossible to say what the writer thinks. Icebergs are sections of glaciers that have broken off in the winter months. Question: is it important to know what icebergs are for the topic of icebergs? Yes, absolutely. So this one has to be a yes or a no. Is it true that icebergs are sections that break off during the winter months? Careful. If it seems too easy, take a second look. Vivek says no. Afsana says no. Definitely important. Roshni, it's what the passage is about, is icebergs. The answer is no. For those of you who are saying no, careful. Winter months. It's not winter months, it's summer months. Okay? The passage says icebergs are sections of glaciers that have broken off. We even did vocabulary on broken off in the summer months. Okay? So in the summer months, so this one's a no, big N for no. They do not break off in the winter months. Winters are cold, so in the winter they stay put, they stay where they are. It's the summer, when it gets warm, that they break off. So pay attention to detail, okay? All right, next one. Icebergs exist because of the densities, because of the different density of ice and salt water. So is it important to know why icebergs exist for this topic? Yes, absolutely. Is it true that we can see icebergs because there's a difference in the densities of ice and salt water? Yes, it is. So for all of you who are answering yes, you're correct. So Jubilant, yes, it's important, and yes, it's true. Absolutely. 90% of the iceberg is hidden below water. Is it important for the understanding of icebergs to know how much of the iceberg we can see above and below the water? Yes, it's important. We're talking about icebergs. If the question has icebergs, glaciers, icebergs in the question, that's already a very good hint that it's going to be important for the topic of icebergs. Is it true that 90% of the iceberg is below the water? Yes, it's true. Now remember, this is yes, no, not given, so you have to put yes, not true. If you put T, they'll mark it wrong, so please don't do that, okay? Make sure you put a yes. Yes, no, not given is different, at least in notation, all right? So yeah. The passage says the antonym of this. The passage says 10% is visible above water. But 10% visible above water means 90% is hidden underwater. Okay? So if we go to the passage will say only 10% of the iceberg is visible above water. Why? Because 90% is hidden below the water. Okay? It makes sense. All right, next one. The name classification of icebergs derive from the Dutch language. Well, I remember I read that icebergs comes from the Dutch language, but is it important to know the name classification, origin, nationality for this topic of icebergs? I don't think so. I agree with all the students who say not important. It's not given. It's too much detail. Okay, it's way too detailed. Maybe if you're reading a whole book on icebergs, but I don't think the author is going to give you this detail in 600-700 words, okay? It's not given. Some icebergs can be the size of a country. Is it important to know how big icebergs can get for the topic of icebergs? Is it important to know the size? So if you're talking to an expert about icebergs, are you going to say, hey, and how big are they? Yeah, of course you will. Okay? You're going to say, yes, I want to know how big can these icebergs get? How big, how small, how tall, how short? Can they be as big as a country? Can it be as big as a country? Yes, not just any country. It can be the size of Belgium. Belgium's a big country. And that's what the passage says. It says the biggest iceberg, it's a descriptive paraphrase, the biggest iceberg in recorded history is the size of Belgium. So no yes, yes, not given, yes. Those are your correct answers, okay? So hopefully you got those all right. So 1 no, 1 not given, 3 yeses. Okay, the sinking of the Titanic. So this is a paragraph completion. It's all coming from one nice big paragraph. Now, some students might say, ooh, fantastic. This is just one paragraph. I can just skim read and search for all these answers. No problem. You can, but maybe you don't have to, okay? Believe in yourself. Believe in your brain. You're smart. So you might not have to search right away. Just try to do it on your own. If you have to search, then fine. But first, use your own mind. The sinking of the Titanic, the big ship. Because there was no international group which monitored icebergs in 1912, it was the sole responsibility of to make sure there were no icebergs in the ship's path. So who had the responsibility of making sure that there were no icebergs there? Maybe the captain? Afsana says maybe the captain? Yeah, maybe the captain, but in this case you would be wrong, so be careful. Vanity, Sean, good to see you in class. You're right, Vanity. It's lookouts. Okay, ships have lookouts. And it's one word. Okay, this is actually a person. It's somebody who's on the top of the ship, looking around for objects like rocks and ice, or maybe even big trees that are floating in the water. Ships still have lookouts, even today, sometimes. You'll have a lookout on a boat. Absolutely. One word, okay? Lookouts, one word. If you don't know, then yeah, check, look for it. To make sure there were no icebergs in the ship's path. The chief reason the iceberg wasn't detected. So this one you might have to search for. This one you probably don't need to search for. The chief reason, so the main reason the iceberg was not detected, so wasn't seen, was the something of the sea. So you need an adjective there. Was something of the sea that night. Not wave. Wave is a noun. Afsan, you have the right word, but you are using an adverb and we need the adjective. So Afsana, do you know the adjective of that word? There you go. Vanity Sean. Afsana, okay, good. Yeah, Jason G. Yeah, calmness. Okay, calmness. Was the calmness of the sea that night. Because of this, there were no waves crashing against the iceberg. When you read this, you'll probably realize, oh, that cannot be waves. Okay, so if you wrote waves here before, when you read waves here, you should realize, that cannot be waves. Making it difficult to spot. The captain swerved, but the iceberg scraped the side of the ship, ripping the something of the ship. Ripping the what? Okay, so you have a boat, and here's our beautiful boat. Does anybody know what this part of the boat is called? So this part of the boat, what is that called? Anybody know? Vanity. Sean, good. Good vocabulary, absolutely. If you don't, then you're looking for the word rip or the synonym tear. If you know what that is, great. Abhishek Dangwal, you're right as well. Vanity, you're right as well. It's hull, the hull. Okay. Not hull, so not with an A, but with a U. Okay, so this is called the hull of the ship. H-U-L-L. Just remember hallway in a building, that's H-A-L-L. Okay, that's a hall. And this is a hull with a U. Okay, so memory by association. Hull, hull. Hull, hull. Okay. All right. Things should have been fine nevertheless, but the watertight compartments were poorly designed. And once the water, let's go to the end here. Sorry, I have to get rid of my pretty drawing there. And once the water was in a few compartments, it was able to something into all the others. We have the preposition to, and we have another one into. So I know that this space here has to be a verb. Okay, that makes sense. So which verb makes sense in this location? It was able to something into all the other. Juan Esteban, fill is not a bad guess. Okay, they might even take that. Afsana has the right answer. It's spill. Okay, spill. So when you're pouring a cup of tea and you miss the cup and it spills on the table. So same idea here. Jubilant says enter. Jubilant, I'm pretty sure they'll take enter because it makes sense, okay? So it's not that only one word is correct. If you have a very, very close synonym, they will take that, okay? So spill or enter will work. Sure, elast, mix, I don't think so. Okay, I don't think they'll take that. All right, it has to make sense. It has to be natural. Spill or enter would be natural. Spill is definitely the best choice. Okay, this is sentence completion coming from various parts of the passage. 2 words maximum. Let's do this. To avoid a Titanic-like disaster in the future, formed the International Ice Patrol. Something formed the International Ice Patrol. Who formed the International Ice Patrol? So somebody formed this ice patrol to make sure that this isn't going to happen. You have an acronym here, IIP, and you have a very specific name. Really easy to skim read for. So definitely do it just so you can check and make sure. We know it's near the end. Ice Patrol. Okay. Who formed the Ice Patrol? After the disaster of the Titanic, maritime authorities realized that a system needed to be put into place to monitor iceberg so that such a catastrophe would not be repeated. By 1914, the International Ice Patrol was formed. Okay, so from this, we can infer that maritime authorities is the right answer. Very good, Vivek. Yeah, absolutely. So, 2 words in this case. Maritime authorities. Formed the Ice Patrol. The IIP's goal is to track the relevant data and something of icebergs. I think this one you can get without looking at the text. What is it? So which word makes sense here and completes the sentence? Easily. Keep it simple. Again, remember, students, that you need to be able to answer about 60, maybe even 70% of these questions without searching. You can't be searching for every answer. Roshni Kunte says movement. ER Subekti says maybe the position. Abhishek says, I think it's movement. And you're right, movement is good. Data and movement. Okay, of icebergs. All right, good. So movements, yeah, they'll probably take a plural if you put movements. Data is plural, so movements is okay as well. Geek, movement, not moving. Okay, it has to be noun form. No, geek, no, it's not correct. Moving is not noun form. Data is a noun, so it has to be noun. Okay, noun and noun. It can't be noun and verb. All right, so careful with that. All right. The Canadian Space Agency bounces something off the water to measure iceberg movement. This question helps you get this one correct. Okay. Now, what does the Canadian Space Agency bounce off water? Hopefully you remember this one. It should be easy. Doesn't bounce information. We can't, I don't think it's information, Ashish. A seal, it's a kind of wave. What kind of wave? Jubilant says it's microwaves, which is correct, but it's one word, just like the machine. So in your home, in the kitchen, you might have a microwave. Jason G, absolutely, microwaves. Okay, bounces microwaves off the water. So shoots microwaves at the water, and that's how it knows what's going on. All right, last question. This data renders large-scale maritime disasters what? So the text says that the disaster like a Titanic will probably not happen. It is, and then 2 words here. So this data renders large-scale maritime disasters. If I have to search, I can search for the word disasters, and I know that's near the end. Okay, so it's coming from the end of the text. Look at the very, very end. Hint, hint. So maritime vessels have access to this information, which allows them to know exactly where any local icebergs are at any moment, meaning that a repeat of the Titanic disaster is, that's right, students, virtually impossible is the correct answer. So you need both words. Not just impossible, because it's not impossible, it's virtually impossible. And good for those students who realize that you need both words there. Okay? So virtually impossible. You don't need to put the period in your answer sheet. Good for you. Okay? Great job. All right, I know that was a pretty intense class today. Lots of information, fast moving. Remember the skills of visualization and learning vocabulary from reading. It is very, very useful learning strategy before the IELTS exam, okay? So read, visualize, underline new words, and remember, for both visualization, effective visualization, and effective vocabulary learning, you have to include yourself and you have to make it interesting. Too much information coming at us. We need to trick the brain into remembering information and being able to use it in the future. All right? ER, Subekti, good luck on your exam tomorrow. I'll keep my fingers crossed that you get a good grade. Okay? Roshni Kunte, yes, you could, as long as it doesn't provide a wrong answer. Okay? So yes, you could, as long as it doesn't make your answer wrong. So careful. Make sure it makes sense still, and they can take it. But if the answer only needs one word, you should try to just get the one word, because if you put a second word, you increase the error rate for spelling mistakes as well. Okay? All right, students, tomorrow, members chat class. I have a couple ideas for that, waiting for some recommendations. Again, visit us at aehelp.com for academic IELTS. The website looks like this. You have practice tests, interactive, phone, tablet. You have a full online course. You have over 100 hours of lesson videos here. All of those gray buttons that you see here are videos. General IELTS, go to this website with the green background. That's it for me for today. Again, help us help you. Spend a couple bucks, join our premium course, use the speaking, writing tools as well. Keep up the good studies. For those of you writing exams this weekend, I know many of you are. I really do wish you the best of luck. I'm with you in spirit. Remember, stay calm. You've done everything you can to learn until now. You can't learn English in 24 hours, so don't stress. Go in there confident. And I will catch you tomorrow. Members, make sure to be present tomorrow for your members chat class. Jason, there's a peer-to-peer speaking and speaking practice interview with professionals option on the website, so check it out. Okay, bye for now, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, or have a great night's rest if it's late in your country.